Hooker High School. Well, I can't think of any place else I would have rather gone to school. All of the kids in our class and the classes surrounding us were all good friends. We had great teachers. As a matter of fact, when I got to college, it seemed like we were way ahead of the kids in the other towns because we had learned so much. In particular, Mr. Campbell's class in biology, we were light years ahead of other students, and music. Hooker kind of became famous for its music teachers. Of course, Mrs. Flanagan, Mr. Stout, Mr. Moeller, all those. But I thought it was great, and of course, loved my football coach, Tom Harris, and he was a great friend, and it was a great experience for me.
Yeah, I like Mrs. Rose real well. Like Coach Lamer, he was a good teacher. Enjoyed him. Mr. Campbell was a wonderful teacher. He was a very, very good teacher. Those are probably some of my favorite teachers.
One that I really enjoyed because she was a good teacher was Mrs. Rose and Mrs. Caldwell. Those were probably the two best teachers I ever had. Didn't recognize that until later in life when I became a teacher myself. And then I could definitely remember qualities of good teaching that they had.
Mrs. Parham and Mr. Campbell.
I admired Doc Campbell. He did me a lot of good. Yeah. He was pretty special.
Actually, I had two. One was Mrs. Wells, in which she was grade school, and then Eggleston, I think it was. And then we had he was the football coach, but he taught history, and I can't remember his name.
Coach Harris.
Harris, okay, all right. But he was a cool teacher because he'd give you a test, but he'd give you the answers so you'd know.
I always liked Don Potter. I don't know, he taught math up there and algebra, and anyway, and of course he was my coach too. I always thought a lot of Don Potter. Always liked Jim Lamer. It seems like I always liked the coach. Jim Lamer, he was a tough coach. Some of the stuff that he did, you couldn't get away with now. A lot of this stuff that we went through, you couldn't do that in today's age. Shoot, you'd go to prison.
Mr. Stout. I really admired Mr. Stout as a band director.
I remember one teacher in particular, FFA advisor Evan Eggleston. He taught life lessons to us every day. We learned something, and it was something that he'd gained through his relationship with Jesus Christ, and he shared that through his teachings, and so we got a good backbone of morals and values, and he was one of the best that I had.
I loved Mr. Potter for math, great math teacher. Mr. Campbell for science, all 4 years. And when I got to be a senior and made it to chemistry, I had broken so many things, which I still tend to do, over the 4 years of science, that he gave me my lab set was plastic. He gave me plastic test tubes as a joke. But who would even think about that? He was great, such a good teacher. I really appreciate, since I became an English teacher, the Mrs. Fields and Mrs. Bostwick, all of the English teachers, Mrs. Caldwell, that we had in high school, because when I went to college, I could write those papers. So I really appreciate that.
Mrs. Rexus was my second grade teacher. Mrs. Eggleston was my first grade teacher.
Probably one of my favorite teachers was Jim Campbell. What a good guy, a good teacher, and he could put a lick on you like nobody else. For such a little guy, he had some torque. Don Potter was a good math teacher. I thought he was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed his classes. Heidi Bostwick was a fun teacher. She was, I can't believe she stayed with us as long as she did.
I loved band. Mr. Stout was awesome. Music, Mrs. Flanagan, I thought she was great.
But I look back now, and I'm so thankful for the Laurel Caldwells and the Miss Flanagans and the Anita Witts and the men, the Jim Lamers and the Tom Harrises and Bill Longest and Ralph Rich. What they instilled in us is what gave us the foundation. Here I am 64 now, but I attribute my successes, not because I'm a millionaire, but what I have in my beliefs and morals, I attribute that to what they taught me.